Hi, everybody. Welcome to this discussion on ethics in psychedelic therapy and compliance with regulation and current ethical codes. Currently, licensing bodies around North America and the world don't tend to have any published information regarding the use of their membership using psychedelic assisted therapy. I expect that as regulations come into place in different provinces, different states, and different countries, that we'll begin to see more published from the licensing bodies themselves, as well as professional associations with regards to their suggestions for how their memberships can assist the public in accessing these medicines in the most safe and ethical ways. But in the meantime, while regulatory bodies are not quite on board and government ministries and health agencies are going through the process of approving these medicines for the larger public, it's still important to know what current ethical guidelines do exist. So be aware that there are some ethical codes available already within the psychedelic realm. So the Canadian Psychedelic Association's ethics, as well as those published by MAPS with regards to their MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, are two ethical codes that are really relevant to practitioners in North America. And I will focus on those for most of this discussion. One thing that I would really recommend to you is that you ensure that you review these codes annually and that you document your review in some way. This will protect you in the event that a malpractice complaint is ever made against you. You're going to have to prove at that time that you're an ethical practitioner and that you were aware of and following any ethical guidelines that were available. So ensuring that you're documenting this in some way. You can do this by printing out the codes and signing and dating an attestation, basically, that you've read it. You can also do this in an email to yourself, which will have a date stamp. And this is evidence that you could provide in the case that a complaint was ever made against you. Now, the Canadian Psychedelic Association has developed a code of ethics that lists 8 core values for psychedelic practitioners. I really love the way they've put this together. It includes suggested activities as well as personal commitment statements that will help practitioners embody the values and understand the application of ethics in the code in a self-referencing way. MAPS out of the United States has also published a code of ethics, which outlines 12 core guidelines for ethical practice as a psychedelic assisted therapist. So I'll dive in first to the CPA Code of Ethics, the Canadian Psychedelics Associations. They have 8 values that they have long descriptions for each. And these values are embodiment of your practice, integrity, respect and care, building capacity for consent, honoring diversity and supporting social justice, competence and lifelong learning, create honoring processes, and honoring people's bodies and boundaries. One thing to note is that the word guide represents all professionals in all capacities that the Psychedelic Association's memberships might serve. Okay, so these guidelines are relevant not just to therapists, but also to other professionals who are involved in psychedelic therapy, such as psychiatrists, nurses, doctors, underground guides, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to read through every single line here on these code of ethics, but I might highlight a few of their potential activities they point out that I find especially intriguing or that really resonate. So for value A, embodiment of your practice. The first thing they have here is engaging in guided journeys and integrating your key learnings into your personal and professional life. So thankfully, as part of Atma's advanced course, everyone should have the opportunity to participate in their own guided journeys. So that's extremely exciting and also a requirement of the Code of Ethics here. It discusses seeking out mentorship and supervision to support your guiding practice. Be personally familiar with the substances you supply. Adopt a stance of humility and equality. Be willing to be vulnerable, open, and curious. And engage in sharing, learning, and growth for the benefit of the community of guides. So reading research, attending online webinars, courses, and retreats. Value B is with regards to integrity. Just going to highlight the top three here that I see as highly relevant. So one is getting familiar and seeking alignment with this code of ethics. And as I've previously suggested, ensure you document your familiarity and perhaps even, as psychedelic medicine becomes more available to the wider public as regulations are put into place, maybe even referencing the code of ethics in your client's file in terms of the activities that you do with them or your decision-making process with regards to suggesting psychedelic assisted therapy. Now, this fourth bullet down, participating in peer review processes, such as an accountability pod on either a predetermined schedule or when you perceive that there may be an ethical issue with another's practice, or where someone, a guide or a participant, has perceived an ethical issue with your practice. So it's really, really important to be willing to be vulnerable to your peers and supervisors and to have really open, trusting relationships in the interest of client care. It can be hard sometimes to put ourselves out there, especially maybe if we've done some type of boundary violation or said something during a journey that really triggered our client, for example. And these are the kinds of things that you really want to be held accountable for so that you can grow in your practice. So it's really important to become part of some type of community of peers or with a supervisor where you're going to debrief and go over your work in this field and be supported in it. And that's also going to protect your clients in terms of your ethical practice. And what else on here would I like to point out to you guys? Welcome feedback from fellow guides and participants about perceived unethical behaviors and take steps to clarify and resolve issues. One way that this could be done could be using an exit slip with your participants after they've completed the journey. And you could have just 2 or 3 quick questions or, check boxes that they check off. And so that way, if anything arose for them during that session that maybe they're not comfortable bringing up to you, but they might feel safer, maybe writing it on a quick slip, giving it to you and exiting the building. This gives you an opportunity to be aware of that. And then during any integration sessions, gives you the opportunity to address that with your client. Okay. Value C, respect and care. So engage in practices where the benefit outweighs harms. Co-create a foundation of building trust, safety, and well-being during sessions. Clarify confidentiality. Promote the dignity of all people. Honor the natural world. Place participants' well-being first. And ensure that you have a location, appropriate support, accommodation, and that you can meet the needs of your participant during follow-up. Okay. Value D is building your capacity for consent. Now, there's a whole other module where I'm going to discuss how to obtain full informed consent with psychedelic therapy. So I won't go into this slide in too much detail. And also the Code of Ethics is available online as well, and likely in your resources for this lesson. Value E, honoring diversity and supporting social justice. So understand the context and functioning of power and power imbalances. Work towards equality in relationships and society, develop cultural competencies, perhaps through workshops or through discussions with friends and family who maybe come from minority groups, understand your own social location and its privileges, and so on and so forth. Value F is competence and lifelong learning. It's really, really important to recognize that our work as therapists, especially in the psychedelic realm, and our learning is really never done. This is a lifelong learning commitment. So engage in learning opportunities on a regular basis. Seek specific training when working in trauma-informed ways. Work within your areas of competence. Increase your own self-awareness regarding projection, transference, and countertransference. So in other words, be really aware of how your ego might get in the way during therapy sessions. Understand how values and beliefs may impact your perceptions and observations, and be informed of the history, effects, research, legal status, medical considerations related to psychedelic therapy. Value G is create honoring processes for your for your participants. So honor your participants as sovereign beings, supply enough information for them to make informed choices, use limited but appropriate self-disclosure, practice your own self-care, set clear boundaries, and co-create a safe and intentional container for your guide and participant sessions. And finally, value H, honoring people's bodies and boundaries. So this one is actually quite important because mostly in therapy in the past, there's not a lot of physical touch that occurs. And in fact, it's often been discouraged over several decades of continuing education and graduate degree programs in therapy. But oftentimes in psychedelic medicine, the use of personal touch is welcomed and sometimes needed. So you want to engage in specific learning opportunities that will build your touch capacity and understand how trauma can be held in our bodies. You want to establish follow-up processes with participants to receive feedback about the impact of your touch. In the consent module, we will discuss a lot about the importance of consent around touch. And as you'll see in that third bullet to the bottom here, throughout each specific session, maintain touch decisions determined at intake and prior to ingesting medicine. Be aware of how these substances might increase confidence, leading to a tendency to bypass personal and cultural boundaries. So hold a clear boundary for your participant and honor that a yes can turn to a no. However, no's should not become yeses. Okay. And again, more on physical touch and consent for that in the consent module. Now, the Canadian Psychedelic Association also has several other documents under development, and I'm really pleased and excited to see these coming out in the near future. These include how to report ethical breaches, how to respond to ethical breaches, best practices for psychedelic therapists, what does reparation look like, how to be part of an ethical therapist peer support or accountability group. So stay tuned to the Canadian Psychedelic Association's website for these guidelines being published. And if you're not already a member, definitely encourage you to join. Now, the Canadian Psychedelic Association, within the ethical code on their website, for each value, they've also listed several personal commitment statements, which will really help therapists embody these values and understand how these values might look in action. So I really encourage you to go on over to the CPA's website and check those out. And then moving now into the MAPS Code of Ethics, which is also very relevant for psychedelic therapists across the world, not just in this United States, and not just those working with MDMA. So this code of ethics was developed with study participants in mind, but it's still applicable to clinical work. So they have 12 different guidelines here, and I'll just quickly go through each, okay? So one of their ethical commitments is safety. We commit to the safety of study participants, patients, and clients. Confidentiality and privacy. We respect the privacy of participants and uphold professional standards of confidentiality. Transparency. We respect each participant's right to make informed choices. Therapeutic alliance and trust. We act in accordance with the trust placed on us by participants. Touch. When using touch in our practice, we always obtain consent and offer touch only for therapeutic purposes. Sexual boundaries. We do not engage in sexual touch with participants. Diversity. We respect and value diversity as it is expressed in the various backgrounds, identities, and experiences of participants and colleagues. Special considerations for non-ordinary states of consciousness. We attend to special considerations when working therapeutically with participants in non-ordinary states of consciousness. Finances. We maintain clear communication with participants about the fees and aspire to increase financial access to service. Competence. We practice within our scope of competence, training, and experience specific to the populations we're working with and the modalities we offer. Number 11, relationships to colleagues and the profession. We establish and maintain compassionate and positive working relationships with colleagues in a spirit of mutual respect and collaboration. and also relationship to self. We commit to ongoing personal and professional self-reflection regarding ethics and integrity. Now, the full version of MAP's Code of Ethics is available as a resource for you within this module, and I encourage you each to check it out. MAPS has provided a much longer, kind of more thorough description for each of these ethical values. So definitely worth reviewing and being aware of, and as I mentioned, documenting that awareness. And as a final piece here, I want to speak a little bit to the current regulations that might be in place. So it's really important that you are aware of what regulations are in your own jurisdiction and how they might impact your work and your ability to work in an ethical fashion with integrity. You know, it would not be considered ethical to be providing this service before regulations kind of catch up to where we're at. So definitely ensure that you have that awareness of where things are at within your own province, state, or country. In January 2023, Alberta published their first regulation. So if you're an Alberta-based therapist, make sure you check that out. Regulatory information can also be sought out for several other jurisdictions. So if you can't find anything online and you're interested in this type of therapy, I would encourage you to contact your licensing body or professional association for their own guidance. Now, I'll finish off with a little quote here for y'all. Ethics is the activity of man directed to secure the inner perfection of his own personality. Thanks for being here, everybody.